probably appeal to you personally. You certainly admire them, and that's where the inspiration comes from. I have a long list of designers and developers and illustrators who I check up on regularly, but there's no point in me listing them all. Here are just a couple of blogs and galleries I can recommend. For your typographic needs, you should definitely check out the Typekit gallery and blog. Then, for a wider spectrum of web design, you have the CSS Website Awards, which is updated daily with new and original web design brilliance. If you're after theory and practical inspiration, you can't go wrong with A List Apart, industry leaders sharing their secrets. Also, don't be afraid to grab inspiration from unlikely sources. I love the illustration work of French genius Macbeth. Just because he focuses on a medium other than web design, it doesn't mean I can't be inspired by his work. And then you have the work of individuals such as Orman Clark, who does lovely things with aesthetics. So those are some websites I like to draw inspiration from. But don't forget about offline sources of inspiration. Web design is a natural progression of print design, so dive into magazines, even look at product design or architecture. Many of the principles and ideas are shared with web design. Often, by observing great design in other mediums, you'll be able to draw fresh ideas and bring them to the web. Communities can be a great source of inspiration. Some are open to all, such as Creatica.com. Then there are others, which accept contributions by invite only, but serve as a great way to get inspiration from people busy in the industry right now. Take Forest, for example. Or Dribble.com. These communities are great, because not only can you get tons of visual inspiration, but also genuine help and advice from the very people whose work you're interested in. Getting feedback from your sources of inspiration can be really important, because it can help you understand why you find something inspiring. Once you've found something inspiring, ask yourself why you like it. Examine all the details, the colours, the fonts, the layout, how it's constructed. Once you understand how an inspiring piece works, you can apply the same principles to your own work without directly copying someone's design. You may not even be inspired by design as a whole. Perhaps your eye's been caught by what Cameron Moll describes as a node of inspiration. Maybe it's the logo type which has you interested. Maybe it's the search box which works extremely well. And web design is built from lots of smaller components, so try and nail down exactly what it is that has your creative juices bubbling. Once you've worked out what it is that you like about something, go elsewhere and look for similar effects. There's no reason why some aspects of your original source of inspiration can't be improved upon. Now let's cover some more examples of further reading, which consolidate a lot of the ideas we've just talked about. First up is this article from the Vandelay Design blog. It addresses several points towards proper inspiration and avoiding copying, like we discussed in one of our earlier videos. Secondly, if you're struggling with designer's block, take a look at this poll on Web Design Tuts and find out how thousands of other designers combat the same problem. There are some pretty creative solutions. Lastly, another poll, this time discussing where folk find their inspiration. Okay, as is usual, it's now time before we dive into the next video for a little assignment. You should be used to this by now. I'd like you to bear in mind that we're working towards a corporate website design. Find 2 elements within other web designs which you find inspirational, effective. They could be menu layouts, footers, examples of typography, whatever. Think about why you've been drawn to them and then how you could achieve similar results. Next time on 30 Days to Your First Website Design, we're going to get visual and look into the style and theme of things. This is Ian Yates, and from all of us here at Tuts Plus, thank you for listening. Hi guys, welcome back to 30 Days to Your First Website Design, a Tuts Plus premium course. I'm Ian Yates, and today we're going to get visual and talk about style and theme. Let's begin as always by taking a quick look at what we're going to cover in this video. Well, we'll start off by defining exactly what we mean by style. Then we're going to look at quite a few examples before we finish off with a note about trends and longevity. And as always, before we jump into the next video, I'll set you a little assignment. Now, you're probably bored of me saying this, but we're back to decision making. Selecting your theme or style is just another choice along the long road of web design. But what do we mean by style and theme? Well, we're referring to visual presence. At its most simple, we could categorize web styles into dark and light, for example. I'm sure you can think of a light website and a dark website off the top of your head right now. We can obviously refine things much further than that. We can categorize styles such as grunge, a grubby, dirty appearance with irregularly positioned and aligned objects, scruffy typography, and often dark and moody. To counter grunge, there's always clean, typically airier than grunge, clearly grid-based and regular, certainly more calming. Then, minimalist websites take clean one step further, stripping away all but the bare essentials. The primary goal, remember we spoke about them, of any minimalist site is usually communicated very clearly. Now, one of my current favourite styles is vintage modernism, which, funnily enough, draws inspiration from both grunge and minimalism, plus some Art Deco and 20th century graphic design thrown in for good measure. Vintage modernism is usually very rich and textured, featuring elaborate typography and fine details. As I suggested in our video about inspiration, you can check out Dribble for examples. It's overflowing with vintage modernism at the moment. Then this example, by Ethan Marcotte, is actually intended to demonstrate what's known as responsive layouts, but it serves just as well for the purposes of this style example. Anyway, you get the point about style. There are tons of styles to play with, and you can even define them for yourself if you're dead clever. In deciding upon a style for your website, you're communicating with your targeted users. But what are you actually doing? Well, the point of style is in essence threefold. And it's most simple, it sets the mood. It can give brands an air of sophistication, organizations a sense of trust, events an element of fun. Secondly, it allows a user to relate with what he or she is experiencing. Familiar elements will help them feel at ease with the website. Then lastly, style helps the design stand out due to uniqueness, and hopefully therefore remain memorable. Now let's break style down a little further, just so we know what we're dealing with. After all, we're going to have to decide upon our own style for the corporate website we're designing. So how do we control the style of our design? Well, we do it with the component elements such as color, texture, typography, imagery, and layout. Color, as we've already touched upon with light and dark, is an easy way to trigger an emotive response from the user. It can be manipulated by means of the complementation, contrast, and vibrancy. Experiment with color services such as Cooler from Adobe. Pay attention to how different color schemes make you feel. Color also plays a vital role in practical terms, text legibility and leading of the eye, but we'll talk about that further down the line. Now, before we wrap up this video, I want to quickly touch upon one final point, and that is longevity. Trends, such as vintage modernism, which we talked about, come and go, so it's worthwhile considering the shelf life of your website. Take the Envato bundles, for example. There have been a few. There was the Flash bundle, we had the Mac app bundle, and the WordPress bundle, just to name a few. The Envato design team do a great job of pulling these together. They're atmospheric, striking, and they're always right up there with current design trends. But what happens when the trends move on? These pages are going to look outdated. Well, in this case, that doesn't matter. Bundle pages have a tiny shelf life. Once they're done, they're done. They exist to gain maximum impact in the short term. Other sites, however, such as news blogs, are in it for the long haul. Their designs tend to be more sympathetic to longevity. That said, in web design, it's not the end of the world when trends do change. Websites are flexible, nothing's set in stone, so they can obviously be updated if needed. Okay, it's time for some further reading. Firstly, I'd like you to read Brandon Moore's article on vintage modernism. Why? Well, because as I mentioned, I like it as a style, so read up on it. Secondly, a brilliant article on colour theory over on, you guessed it, Web Design Tuts. Thomas Cannon covers all you need to know. And before we jump into the next video, as you'll have been expecting, I have a little assignment for you. Keep in mind our corporate web design and ask yourself what kind of style it should follow. Think about who our users will be and therefore what kind of colours and textures, typography would suit their tastes most. Okay, that's it for now. Once again, you've been watching 30 Days to Your First Website Design. In our next video, we're going to take a look at conceptual sketching. I'm Ian Yates, and from all of us at Tuts Plus, thanks again for tuning in. Hi guys, welcome back to 30 Days to Your First Website Design, a Tuts Plus premium course. I'm Ian Yates, and today we're going to get practical by looking into conceptual sketching, otherwise known as wireframing or prototyping. As usual, we'll begin with a quick breakdown of what we're going to cover in this video. First off, we're going to ask ourselves what wireframing is, how we go about it, and why it's worthwhile. We'll then look at some tools which will help you along. And lastly, as ever, I'll set you a little assignment before we jump into the next video. Now, when I was at art college many moons ago, we used to do life drawing. Every week our life model, Graham, would drop his robe on the floor and contort himself for a good few hours. And one of the most useful techniques I can remember being taught was taking a big stick of charcoal and being told to sketch one drawing per minute for 10 minutes. To begin with, we felt rushed, of course, but the results were surprisingly effective. It made us really think about what the essentials of our drawings were without getting tangled up in the details, like Graham's face. We were sketching in its rawest form. Now, wireframing appears to all intents and purposes to be a web design equivalent of this, but there's one essential difference between sketching and wireframing. Sketching is part of the creative process. It's brainstorming and experimenting. Wireframing is more about visualizing the information architecture. It's about getting layout and functionality ideas down quickly, establishing relationships, the bare bones of your finished design. So what do we need to practice wireframing? Well, the tools are fairly complicated. You're going to need a piece of this and one of these. Yep, that's it. Of course, you can do your mocking up using all manner of available tools. There are templates for Photoshop, Illustrator, Fireworks, UI kits which can help you lay out website elements quickly and edit them just as quickly if you need to. And we're now going to take a look at a tool called Balsamiq. It's a Flash-based rapid wireframing application, and it comes in desktop or browser flavors. It demonstrates perfectly how we can quickly pull together a wireframe. It's not free, unfortunately, but you can easily make use of the demo version, as I'll show you now. Now, I've downloaded it and installed it to my system, so let's open it up. And there it is. Now, you can see we have a canvas here, plus a menu and a toolbar up at the top. The controls are fairly self-explanatory. The menus are intuitive, and if you're used to working with any graphic application at all, you'll have no trouble. Let's begin with our empty workspace. Now, we can use the toolbars to place various elements on our page, like this. It needn't be perfect. We're looking to demonstrate relationships between the elements on the page and get a rough idea of the layout. It's great for your own reference, it's great for communicating with colleagues how you envisage a layout, and it's perfect for demonstrating web projects to clients. Now let's quickly just mock up our corporate website. We'll begin with, let's see, a horizontal rule. Now we're going to work roughly here. The dimensions aren't really important. We're just going to mock up our layout. We can select these things. We can press shift and move them up and down with restricted movement. We also have, if we copy and paste one of them, you'll be able to see these guides popping up on the left and right. So they can be pretty useful as well. Now we're going to start here with, let's see, let's pop a logo in our top left corner. Just a quick one. There we go. That'll make it a little bit longer and a bit narrower. I want to line it more or less with the grid. Then to the right of our page, we should probably have some form of primary navigation. We'll pop that down there. We'll call that home, that's good. And then we'll have an about us page perhaps our services, and a contact link. And this common delimited list here turns into a neat little navigation bar when we press enter there. Now you can see more guides popping up, so we can see that centralized with our logo there, and it aligns to the right with our horizontal rules. Now within our horizontal rules, we're going to pop in a great big title, a nice big snappy something or other that's going to show people exactly what's going on. Let's see. There we go. Nice little testimonial from a client there. Little on the large side. Double click that and edit it. Oh, that doesn't work. This is just a title. Okay, we'll just leave it at that. Okay, we'll come down to this little window down here. We'll make it central text, and we'll align it with the middle of our page as so. Now we'll move our horizontal rule down a little bit, and we're going to add a button in there which is going to act as a call to action. It's going to encourage people to take some action and have a look further. There we go. That's our button. We'll align that centrally as well. Okay, that's looking good. Now down here we're going to have some more images. So we'll find our image element here. Pop that in. We'll call that thumb 1. Now we're going to work with a rough 3-column layout. So let's just copy that. We'll move another one to the far side here, and then we'll copy it again and move on to the middle of our page. Bang. There's a guide. Very good. Then underneath these, on the 3 columns, we can put some sort of subtitles. So let's have a look. Now if I want to refine the list of elements on this toolbar here, I can just hit one of these buttons which will filter what I'm after. So I'm going to hit text, which is just going to bring up all the text elements here. You see there are much fewer things to be choosing from. So I'll drag a subtitle down here, and actually subtitle is perfect, so I'll just leave it at that. Okay, and then I'm going to copy and paste that over there, and I'll paste another one over there. Then lastly, let's see, we'll find a paragraph. We'll whack that in there. I'm just going to bring up a browser here. I'm going to grab some dummy text from libsyn.com. Don't need very much. Copy that, send that away again, and paste it in there. That's way too much, but it makes no difference. And you'll see our page is actually stretched to accommodate our larger element there. So we could continue down and make a really, really long page if we needed to. Okay, so we've got a couple of blocks of text in our columns there, thumbnails above them and a subtitle there. Now, the spacing is all over the shop. The alignment is roughly correct, and you've got a very good idea there of how our layout is going to be. You can see more or less the layout in terms of its spacing and the white space, and that's looking pretty good. Now what do we do with that? Well, we can either save it as it is, and we can work on the project later, or we can go to File and we can export it as a ping image. As you can see here from this little notification here, it should have saved to my desktop. So close this down, pop, and I'll just double click on that image there, and here it is opened up in Photoshop. So now we can use this as a basis for our layout later. It's very handy. Okay, that's enough about that. That was a quick demonstration of fleshing out your wireframe with Balsamiq. Very good. Now, it's time for some further reading. So we'll jump back into our presentation. And I'd firstly like you to read, well, none of this is required reading. These are more resources that I'd like you to check out. They're for your own benefit. First up, we've got wireframes.lanowski.ca. This is a blog about everything wireframe. It's full of examples, resources, and tools and news. You'll be amazed at how much there is to say about wireframing. Secondly, take a look at webwithoutwords.com. It's a quirky online resource which demonstrates loads of familiar sites in wireframe form. It's a great way of stepping back and examining the skeletons of effective web design. I've got an example of one here for you. I'll bring back the browser. Recognize this one? Of course you do. Alright. Now lastly, if you're interested in seeing any website wireframed, check out the Wirify bookmark tool. Drag it into your bookmarks, click it whilst you're visiting any web page you choose, and you'll see that page wireframed. Now lastly, a little assignment. I want you to go away and sketch up a wireframe of our corporate site using what I did just a minute ago as a basis. It doesn't matter how you do it, whether you use a pen or paper, or if you opt for a tool of some kind. The important thing is to visualize the relationships between all the elements you've sketched out. Okay, that just about wraps up wireframing. Next time on 30 Days to Your First Website Design, we're going to look at using grids. I'm Ian Yates, and from all of us here at Tuts Plus, thank you for watching. Hi guys, welcome back to 30 Days to Your First Website Design, a Tuts Plus premium course. I'm Ian Yates, and today we're going to talk about designing with grids. Now we'll begin as always by taking a quick look at what we're going to cover in this video. Well, we'll start by asking ourselves, what's so great about grids? What are they and where did they come from? Then we'll have a look at the anatomy of a grid before we check out the 960 grid system. Lastly, we'll touch upon baseline grids before, as usual, I set you a little assignment. So what are grids and why do designers rave on about them so much? Well, grid systems have been around for centuries and have been used as the basis for layout since the earliest days of print. They form vertical and horizontal guides within which a layout can be composed. Designers rely on grids to lend structure to their layout. Grids bring order to chaos, and they take a load of the decision making out of your hands, which allows you to get stuck into the creative aspects of designing. Newspaper layouts, be they online or in print, are clear examples of grid usage, but designs based on a grid don't have to always be quite so obvious. The anatomy of a grid is pretty straightforward. The proportions can alter depending on the framework or your personal approach, but the composite elements remain the same. You have margins, which form the space between the container and the content of the grid. Then, of course, we have the columns, which are the vertically running bands within a grid, and the gutters, which are the spaces between them. Then we're left with the rows and the flow lines, which run horizontally across the grid. So those are the bits and bobs which comprise the whole thing. Now, adhering to these guides will help bring order to your design, which helps the flow of your layout, it clarifies relationships between design elements, and strengthens the hierarchy, or the level of importance, attached to individual components. Improperly aligned objects might not sound like a big problem, but they can be subconsciously distracting for the user, making for a less pleasant user experience. Then again, deliberately breaking the boundaries of a grid can bring instant attention to a detail. Now you can design a grid yourself, open up your graphic application, be it Photoshop, Fireworks, Illustrator, whatever, then use the native grid, ruler and guide tools to build a system on which to base your design. But where web design is concerned, it's often easier to grab one of the many available grid frameworks. They more often than not come with a variety of graphic templates, backed up by CSS files for making the transition to the browser straightforward. Now we're going to have a look at the 960 grid system on which we're going to base our corporate website layout. So we'll open up a browser and we'll just go and visit the site straight away, 960.gs, there we go. And you can see here we've got a big old download button. Great example of a call to action if ever I saw one. So we'll just click that for the time being so it's downloading. Won't take long. You can see here there's a lot of documentation, a whole load of examples of sites which make use of the 960 grid framework. You'll probably recognize some of them. Then we've got some snippets and examples at the bottom, and some more resources such as tutorials, including a couple by NetTouch here. Now that's finished downloading, so I'm going to show that in my Finder and double click it just to decompress it. Okay, I'll get rid of my browser. So what we have within our file here from the 960 grid system is a load of directories. We have some plugins for apps. We have the code, which I was talking about earlier, the CSS, and some demos which run that. Then we have these sketch sheets, which are brilliant. Now the 960 grid system works on a basis of 960 pixels width. And the various templates come in 12, 16 or 24 column variants. Now we'll just open up the 16 column variant sketch sheet here, and you can see it. You can imagine printing this. You've got the dummy browser area there, and you can just scribble away on them and plan out your web designs. Clearly see here the columns and the gutters laid out for you. But for the time being, we're going to check out the templates. Now they're catered for pretty much every possible application here. You can see Balsamic here, which we touched on a couple of videos ago. We have CorelDRAW, should you use that, Fireworks, Illustrator, Photoshop. We're going to open a Photoshop example now, so I'm just going to open up this 12 column variant and bring it into my window here. It's a very simple file. It's just a background, you can see my layers here, with an additional layer for our 12 column grid. Now I can toggle that to make it visible or invisible depending on what I'm doing. But for the time being, I'm just going to quickly drag in some assets I've prepared just to show you how quickly you can pull together an effective looking layout. I'm just going to bring up my guides here with Control and Command and colon. There we go. Now I'm snapping to my guides as well, which helps me bring everything in line. So I've got a big header there. I'm going to drag in a little subheader there. That goes to the left of the document as well. Oops. Like that. Now let's see, I've got a horizontal rule which I can place somewhere like that. Oops. Let's try this again. Remove that auto select, just shift that over to the left. Okay, now I've got a couple of paragraphs of text which I can drag over at the same time. I prepared these earlier because it was a lot quicker and less boring for you to watch. So we've got those nicely forming two columns there with a gutter in between, you can see, and just 3 blocks of colour to illustrate how versatile the system is, because I've now got 3 columns of equal width as well. Now if I get rid of my guides, and I get rid of the columns, you can see I've very quickly pulled together a very neat and clear layout. A good relationship between the columns and everything involved. It's very quick, but we're going to dive further into this when we actually start laying out our design. We're going to use the 960 grid system. So for the time being, we'll jump back into our presentation, because we've talked a lot about the vertical aspects of the grid, such as this, but now we're going to have a look at the horizontal elements, namely the baseline grid. Now the baseline grid is also very useful, particularly in terms of having large bodies of text. Baseline grid, which runs horizontally, is extremely useful. Now conforming to a baseline grid means regulating the line height and the vertical spacing of your text. Regardless of the font size, the line height of all elements must stick to the grid. Now, we have here an example which I mocked up earlier, and which is available in the download files for this video. It comprises paragraphs and headings, various font sizes, but crucially they all share line heights and vertical spacing which fit to the grid, whether it be 20 pixels or 40 pixels. There you can see the line heights illustrated, and here you have the margins. Now you can see by the time the text reaches the bottom of the page, it's still perfectly aligned, which is very easy on the eye. Now you might say, big deal, but here's an example of exactly the same text, exactly the same font sizes, but with headings with slightly different line heights. Now you can see it doesn't match up properly, and suddenly it's a bit irritating to the eye. Okay, it's time for some further reading now. Firstly, I'd like you to check out thegridsystem.org. It has a ton of grid resources and references all in one place. Great site. Secondly, to dive further into using the 960 grid system, have a look at this article on Web Design Tuts. It covers using the 960 grid system